Hey, what's going on, everybody? My friend Donnie just told me that this was going live, and I was like, look, it's closing arguments. Why don't we listen to them together and talk about it? I guess I have a busy day of filming, but oh well, this is a pretty important topic, I think. So I'm going to put it up live. It's on BBC right now, and we'll listen to it together. Do I have headphones over here? He was just giving them instructions.
Of criminal responsibility. All right. Now, to prove the defendant guilty of any crime, the Commonwealth must first prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was criminally responsible at the time the alleged crime was committed. The Commonwealth bears the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime with which she is charged, and also that the defendant is criminally responsible for her conduct. The defendant has no burden to prove a lack of criminal responsibility. Criminal responsibility is a legal term. A person is not criminally responsible for her conduct if she has a mental disease or defect.
Okay.
And as a result of that mental disease or defect, she lacks the
He's allowing manslaughter too, I think.
Either to appreciate the criminality or wrongfulness of her conduct, or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law. The phrase mental disease or defect is a legal term, not a medical term. It need not fit into a formal medical diagnosis. The phrase mental disease or defect does not include any abnormality characterized only by repeated criminal conduct. It is for you to determine, in light of all the evidence, whether the defendant had a mental disease or defect. If the Commonwealth has proved to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not suffering from a mental disease or defect at the time of the killing, the Commonwealth has satisfied its burden of proving that the defendant was criminally responsible. If the Commonwealth has not proved to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not suffering from a mental disease or defect,
which I don't think, honestly, I believe that she was suffering. I don't think he proved it, though.
Of a mental disease or defect, the defendant lacked the substantial capacity either to appreciate the criminality or wrongfulness of her conduct or to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law. To establish that the defendant had the substantial capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that any mental disease or defect that may have existed did not deprive the defendant of her ability to behave as the law requires, that is, to obey the law. The word appreciate means to understand rather than merely to know. Criminality means the legal significance of conduct. Wrongfulness means the moral significance. The Commonwealth must prove that the defendant knew and understood that her conduct was illegal or that it was wrong. It's not enough for the Commonwealth to show that the defendant merely knew or was intellectually aware that her conduct was illegal or wrong. Rather, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a mental disease or defect did not deprive the defendant of a meaningful understanding of the legal,
without
moral
a doubt,
significance of her conduct.
One of the outcomes of this.
The defendant must have been able to realize in some meaningful way that her conduct was illegal or wrong. In considering whether the Commonwealth has met its burden of proof, you may consider all the evidence that's been presented at this trial. You may consider the facts underlying the crime and evidence of the defendant's actions before and after the crime. You may consider the opinions of any experts who testified and give those opinions whatever weight you think they deserve. Now, in a moment, I'll instruct you on the elements of the offense that the Commonwealth alleges that the defendant has committed. Remember that the Commonwealth must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was criminally responsible at the time that the crime was committed. That is, that the defendant did not lack criminal responsibility at that time. Therefore, it is the Commonwealth's burden to prove at least one of the following.
The burden is on the
beyond a reasonable
prosecution,
doubt.
not the defense.
One, that at the time of the alleged crime, the defendant did not suffer from a mental disease or defect. Or two, that if the defendant did suffer from a mental disease or defect, she nonetheless retained the substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness or criminality of her conduct and to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law. Now, as I previously instructed you, your decision should be based solely on the evidence and the law of this case. If the defendant is found not guilty by reason of lack of criminal responsibility, the district attorney or another appropriate authority may, and generally does, petition the court to commit the defendant to a mental health facility or to Bridgewater State Hospital. If the court concludes that the defendant is mentally ill and that her discharge would create a substantial likelihood of serious harm to herself or others, then the court will grant the petition and commit the defendant to a proper mental health facility or to Bridgewater State Hospital. Periodically, the court reviews the order of commitment. If the defendant is still suffering from mental disease or defect and is still dangerous, then the court will order the defendant to continue to be committed to the mental health facility or to Bridgewater State Hospital. There is no limit to the number of such renewed orders of commitment as long as the defendant continues to be mentally ill and dangerous. If these conditions do continue, the defendant may remain committed for the duration of her life. If at some point the defendant is no longer mentally ill and dangerous, the court will order her discharged from the mental health facility or from Bridgewater State Hospital after a hearing. The district attorney must be notified of any hearing concerning whether the person may be released.
She's going to end up in a facility, guilty or innocent.
Such hearing.
She ends up in the same place.
The final decision,
really, it's all paperwork at that
point, to recommit or release the defendant is always made by the court. Now, I'm going to go over at this point the specific elements of the charges against Ms. Clancy. So I want to talk first about murder in the first degree.
Defense,
the
no.
defendant is charged with
it would be a prosecution's job to do that.
Charging murder. One count each relating to Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and Callan Clancy. The instructions I'm going to give now apply to each separate indictment relating to each child. There are two different degrees of murder. There's murder in the first degree and there's murder in the second degree. If you find the defendant guilty of murder, you shall decide the degree of murder. The Commonwealth alleges that the defendant committed murder in the first degree on the following theories. First, that it was murder with deliberate premeditation, and then second, and or it was murder with extreme atrocity or cruelty. To find the defendant guilty on any of these theories of murder, you must be unanimous. That is, all of the deliberating jurors must agree that the Commonwealth has met its burden of proving every required element of that theory beyond a reasonable doubt.
I think she has psychosis.
The appropriate box or boxes on the verdict slip as to each theory.
I think she is not guilty on insanity.
I'll go over a little bit later the verdict slip and how that.
I don't know if it's going to stick, but that's what I believe.
Now, so if you're unable to agree unanimously that the Commonwealth has met its burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt either of these theories of first-degree murder, you shall consider whether the Commonwealth has proved the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of murder in the second degree. So I'm going to begin by instructing you on the elements and the additional requirements of proof for each of these theories of murder in the first degree. And then I'll instruct you on murder in the second degree. All right. So number one, I'll first define the elements of murder in the first degree with deliberate premeditation. Mm-hmm. To prove the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree with deliberate premeditation, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the following elements. One, the defendant caused the death of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and or Callan Clancy. Two, the defendant intended to kill Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and or Callan Clancy.
There's a lot of people who believe that.
Consciously and purposefully intended to cause
Chair Bear, she's not going to be acquitted.
Dawson Clancy's and or
she's going to end up in a
And
place.
3, that the defendant committed the killing with deliberate premeditation. That is, she decided to kill after a period of reflection. I'll now discuss each of these requirements in more detail. The first element is that the defendant caused the death of Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy. A defendant's act is the cause of death, where the act in a natural and continuous sequence results in death, and without which death would not have occurred. The second element is that the defendant intended to kill Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and/or Callan Clancy. That is, the defendant consciously and purposefully intended to cause the death.
I don't think death penalty is on the
third
table.
element is that
I
the
could be wrong
defendant
about that.
committed the killing with deliberate premeditation. That is, she decided to kill after a period of reflection. Deliberate premeditation does not require any particular length of time of reflection. A decision to kill may be formed over a period of days, hours, or even seconds. The key is the sequence of the thought process. And it would be
This is what I'm
first,
thinking.
the consideration whether to kill, second, the decision to kill, and third, the killing arising from that decision. There is no deliberate premeditation where the action is taken so quickly that a defendant takes no time to reflect on the action and then to decide to do it. In deciding whether the defendant intended to kill the deceased and whether she formed that intent with deliberate premeditation, you may consider any credible evidence that the defendant suffered from a mental impairment.
This is wrong.
Or was affected by her
This is
consumption
misinformation,
of
Chair Bear.
prescription drugs.
You need to check your
A
misinformation
defendant
before you put it out
may form
here.
the required intent and act with deliberate premeditation, even if she suffered from a mental impairment or consumed prescription drugs. But you may consider that evidence. Now, I want to talk about the second theory of first-degree murder, which is murder with extreme atrocity or cruelty.
The lack of motive is what it is for
You
me.
shall
The
consider
lack of
this
motive
theory
is
of murder
why I think
in
she
the
went
first
crazy.
degree, regardless of whether or not you find that the Commonwealth has proved murder in the first degree with deliberate premeditation, which I just discussed. To prove the defendant guilty of murder with extreme atrocity or cruelty, the Commonwealth must prove the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. 1, that the defendant caused the death.
Yes, I think this
Cora
is the
Clancy,
main, what most
Dawson
people
Clancy,
think
and/or Callan
that
Clancy.
the common sense tells us.
Second element, the defendant either A, intended to kill Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy. B, she intended to cause grievous bodily harm to Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy. Or C,
I think people are confused.
intended
This
to
isn't
do an
proving that she
act
did it.
which in
This
the
is
circumstances
saying she's
known
not
to the
guilty based
defendant,
on
a
her being
reasonable
in
person would
psychosis.
have known
She did it.
created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result. The third element was that the killing was committed with extreme atrocity and cruelty. Extreme atrocity or cruelty, I'm sorry. I'll now discuss each of these requirements in more detail. The first element to this theory is that the defendant caused the death of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy.
Can you
and/or
just say the
Callan
kids?
Clancy. A defendant's act is the cause of death, where the act is a natural and continuous sequence, results in death, without which death would not have occurred. The second element is about the defendant's intent, which the Commonwealth must prove in at least
I like
one
this,
of
Judge.
3 ways. These are that the defendant, A, intended to kill Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy, or B, intended to cause grievous bodily harm
Good
to
point.
Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy, or C, intended to do an act
Also a good
which in the
point.
circumstances known to the defendant, a reasonable person would have known created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result. As you can see, to this intent element, the Commonwealth satisfies its burden if it proves the defendant's intent beyond a reasonable doubt in any one of those 3 ways. The first way of proving intent, that the defendant intended to kill, is the same as the second element of murder in the first degree with deliberate premeditation, which I discussed a few minutes ago. The second and third ways of proving intent are different from any element of murder in the first degree with deliberate premeditation. So the second way is that the defendant intended to cause grievous bodily harm to Cora, Dawson, and or Callan Clancy. Grievous bodily harm means severe injury to the body. The third way to prove this is that the defendant intended to do an act which, in the circumstances known to the defendant, a reasonable person would have known created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result. Let me help you to understand how to analyze this third way of proving the defendant's intent. You must first determine whether the defendant intended to perform the act that caused the death. So if you find that the defendant intended to perform the act, then you must determine what the defendant herself actually knew about the relevant circumstances at the time she acted. Then you must determine whether under the circumstances known to the defendant, a reasonable person would have known that the act created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result. In deciding whether the defendant intended to kill, intended to cause grievous bodily harm, or intended to do an act which, in the circumstances known to the defendant, a reasonable person would have known created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result, you may consider any credible evidence that the defendant suffered from mental impairment or was affected by her consumption of prescription drugs. A defendant may have the requisite intent even if she suffered from a mental impairment or consumed drugs, but you may consider such evidence in determining whether the Commonwealth has proved this element. Now, the third element in this theory is that the killing was committed with extreme atrocity or cruelty. Extreme atrocity means an act that is extremely wicked or brutal, appalling, horrifying, or utterly revolting. Extreme cruelty means that the defendant caused the person's death by a method that surpassed the cruelty inherent in the taking of a human life. You must determine whether the method or means of killing is so shocking as to amount to murder with extreme atrocity or cruelty. The inquiry focuses on the defendant's actions in terms of the manner and means of inflicting death and on the resulting effect on the deceased. In deciding whether the Commonwealth has proved beyond a reasonable doubt,
I think she's at the hospital,
that the defendant caused the death with extreme atrocity or cruelty, you must consider the following factors. 1, whether the defendant was indifferent to or took pleasure in the suffering of the deceased. 2, whether the defendant's method or means of killing was reasonably likely to substantially increase or prolong the conscious suffering of the deceased. Or 3, whether the means used by the defendant were excessive and out of proportion to what would be needed to kill a person. In considering whether the means used by the defendant were excessive and out of proportion to what would be needed to kill a person, you may consider.
I highly doubt it. That's not going to come till
the injuries to the
but they're going to deliberate for a couple of days. Then they're going to come back, guilty, not guilty. If she's guilty, then they'll do sentencing in another day. Probably weeks away from that.
Severity of the force used. And D, the nature of the weapon, instrument, or method used.
This is a weird
one.
Cannot
make a finding of extreme
the fact that she called them in the midst of killing them,
unless it is based on one or more of the factors that I just listed. You may consider the defendant's mental condition at the time of the killing, including any credible evidence of mental impairment or the effect on the defendant of her consumption of prescription drugs in determining whether the Commonwealth has proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the killings with extreme atrocity or cruelty. A defendant may have committed the killing with extreme atrocity or cruelty even if she suffered from a mental impairment or consumed prescription drugs, but you may consider such evidence in determining whether the Commonwealth has proved this element. Now I want to talk about murder in the second degree. In order to prove murder in the second degree, the Commonwealth must prove the following elements. 1, that the defendant caused the death of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and or Callan Clancy. 2, that the defendant A, intended to kill Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and/or Callan Clancy, or B, intended to cause grievous bodily harm to Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and/or Callan Clancy, or C,
I don't think she was
intended to
formally.
do an act which, in the circumstances known to the defendant,
It doesn't mean
a
she didn't
reasonable
have it, though.
person would have known created a plain and strong likelihood that death would result. The requirements of proof for murder in the second degree are the same as for murder in the first degree with extreme atrocity or cruelty, but without the element that the killing was committed with extreme atrocity. All right. And I discussed those elements earlier when I discussed the charge or the theory of first degree murder committed with extreme atrocity or cruelty. So they're listed in that other section. All right. Now, I want to talk about manslaughter. If you find that the Commonwealth has not proven the charges of first degree or second degree murder, you shall consider the lesser offense of manslaughter.
I don't get this.
Now,
this is weird.
Manslaughter is an unlawful killing unintentionally caused by wanton or reckless conduct. Wanton or reckless conduct is intentional conduct that creates a high degree of likelihood that substantial harm will result to another person. An omission or failure to act may constitute wanton or reckless conduct only where the defendant has a duty to act. To prove that
there's no evidence that Patrick was cheating on her.
Manslaughter because of wanton or reckless conduct, the Commonwealth must prove the following elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, that the defendant caused the death of Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy. Two, that the defendant intended the conduct that caused the death of Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy. And three, that the defendant's conduct was wanton or reckless. I'll now discuss each element in more detail. The first element is that the defendant caused the death of Cora, Dawson, and/or Callan Clancy. As I've said before, the defendant's act was the cause of death, where the act in a natural and continuous sequence results in death, and without which death would not have occurred. The second element is that the defendant intended the conduct that caused the death. The Commonwealth is not required to prove that the defendant intended to cause the death. And the third element is that the defendant's conduct was wanton or reckless. Wanton or reckless conduct is conduct that creates, a high degree of likelihood that substantial harm will result to another. It is conduct involving a grave risk of harm to another that a person undertakes with indifference to or disregard the consequences of such conduct. If the defendant realized the grave risk created by her conduct, her subsequent act amounts to wanton or reckless conduct, whether or not a reasonable person would have realized the risk of grave danger. Even if the defendant did not realize the grave risk of harm to another, however, the act constitutes wanton or reckless conduct if a reasonable person, knowing what the defendant knew, would have realized that the act posed a risk of grave danger to another. It is not enough for the Commonwealth to prove the defendant acted negligently, that is, in a manner that reasonably careful persons would not have acted. The Commonwealth must prove that the defendant's actions went beyond negligence and amounted to wanton or reckless conduct, as I've defined that term. So in deciding whether the defendant knew or should have known her conduct created a high degree of likelihood that substantial harm would result to another, you may consider any credible evidence that the defendant suffered from a mental impairment or was affected by her consumption of prescription drugs. A defendant may have the requisite knowledge even if she suffered from a mental impairment or consumed prescription drugs, but you may consider such evidence in determining whether the Commonwealth has proved this element. All right. So that's my instructions on the specific elements of the charges in this case. So at this point, I'm going to ask the attorneys to deliver their closing arguments.
This is such a weird line because then anybody who's ever had anybody murdered in the family failed to protect them. That doesn't.
Evidence. All right.
I don't like that.
I'll go over that a little bit later, but I just wanted to remind you that. And so after we go through the closing arguments, I'll come back and give you the balance of my instructions on the law. All right. And so, counsel.
All right, here we go.
About 5 weeks ago that we met like this, and I indicated to you that thank you for incredible service. That, all of us mean that sincerely. You took literally more than a month out of your lives and sat here attentively, incredible, through some of the toughest, most gut-wrenching things that any person can be subjected to. And I think I indicated that, sadly, jurors carry this trauma with them for years. And the service that you have performed, I have never seen before.
Okay.
You have listened to evidence. You have been fair.
As I can't turn it up. This is their feed.
Objective. You've listened to the judge's instructions, and you've carried them into your heart, consistent with your oath, which is a very, very solemn oath. Pass between government and Lindsay, who has placed herself on her country, which country you are, as a jury of her peers. When you consider what's at stake here in the sense of what we've been dealing with, Cora, Dawson, Callan.
What the hell?
She knows loss.
She knows loss.
And that's why we think Cora, Dawson, Callan.
Oh, here come the tears.
They are the victims of this case. They are the victims of the horrible, horrific act.
Why do people say there's not a police investigation? There absolutely was.
To decide whether or not Lindsay is guilty. Beyond a reasonable doubt, as His Honor instructed you and will instruct you, what that means, that standard of proof that we as citizens in this country are so blessed to have, proof beyond a reasonable doubt before the government charges any citizen with a crime. I don't care how many cops you have in here, how many DAs are sitting here, how many people are sitting in the front row, and they're all going to sit there and be proud of this prosecution. I told you in the opening statement that this is a prosecution that has ripped the soul out of this girl.
Huh?
This is what they had. This is their family.
Damn it! Ow!
This turn into this. How?
What is that?
Because of the damn medicine and the lousy medical care that
Oh,
she
okay,
got.
okay.
You can troop as many paid experts as you want to come in here and tell the jury, oh, well, she didn't say that she heard voices inside her head. She said she heard voices from outside her head. She said she was making chicken McNuggets. There was a bowl on the sofa. She wasn't making chicken McNuggets. She said something. As I think and I muse and I try real hard to tell you what my opinion is, that this woman was acting in her right mind when these children were killed.
This is my take. It's like, show the pictures. What is the motive for her to do this?
When you consider the evidence in this case, you consider the person who is in front of you, who is the defendant, as the government refers to her, and as His Honor will will than likely tell you, even though a person is a defendant in our system of justice, you don't have to defend against anything. The government has the burden of proof. When the DA decides to charge someone with a crime, he has the burden of proof. His assistants have the burden of proof to prove, number one, that Lindsay is guilty of this offense beyond a reasonable doubt, and then prove, number two, that Lindsay, at the time, killed her children, was not suffering from a mental disease.
He just admitted it right there, by the way, for those arguing that it was Patrick. He's saying that she did it.
A lack of substantial capacity to appreciate, to know, to realize that what was being done while she was in a psychosis.
This is
But
a
we'll
precedent.
laugh
Yeah.
about that. It's just another woman. I guess it's just going to make an excuse. She's depressed. GAD, general anxiety. Give her a couple of pills, she'll be all right. You know from looking at the objective evidence in this case, this young lady, believe me, I don't have many clients like that. This young lady did nothing wrong in her life. She was
What?
a nurse,
Oh,
a daughter, a wife, and a darn good mother.
you should try it.
You can see from the objective evidence. You can see, and you'll have all the exhibits for you to look at. And you can see by looking at these photographs, which you will have in the jury room. You can see the Facebook postings. You can see what she indicates about, for example, I just randomly grabbed this one. A son, my prince, that they would have you think she killed him first, cruelly, because she didn't like him.
Ooh,
That is repulsive.
that's what they said. That's wow.
So
What?
she's living real life with Pat, her kids, having a great time that summer. Life is good. She had to go back to work. In an opening statement, I told you, I said, watch the evidence. Watch the manipulation. Because that's what this case was built upon originally, and how it developed as the case progressed until it's in front of you. And how does that happen? Well, in the very beginning, going all the way back to when the first 911 call that you had to suffer through was made. You could hear
They said that.
in the voice, Pat Clancy, the horror, what he had obviously experienced. You can see from the evidence that's before you the injuries that she suffered. You will have in the jury room the exhibits that indicated the extent of the injuries from, I don't have to go through all of them, the extent of the injuries to slitting her throat, to slashing her wrists, throwing herself out a window, blood all over the bedroom floor, window open, screen slashed. Oh no, screen wasn't slashed, my bad. That's what she thought. It's called a delusion. She was in a
Okay.
psychosis when she thought that. Probably right here, sitting here, believes that she slashed the screen. She
What?
didn't. Subjective evidence.
Oh, I see what he's doing
And
here.
why did we spend almost a week showing you the extent and the severity of that suicide attempt? The reason
She did not have a collapsed throat.
do that is because they were arguing that it was a fake suicide. Dinky little cuts, no bleeding. She didn't mean to kill herself. She's going to throw herself out the window, I guess, and slide down the house. Remember that one hanging off of the window, sliding down the house, and Lindsay screwed up, and she hurt herself bad. You know that's not what happened. You know that she made the testimony of Dr. Velkovich, that she made a very, very significant suicide effort, slashing her wrist, slitting her throat. And isn't it interesting when you consider objective evidence? Googling slitting a throat, Googling suicide, Googling drugs, Googling side effects, Googling ketamine treatments, Googling all of these drugs, Googling the effects of Tufts medications, lorazepam, sertraline, hydroxyzine, lorazepam, buspirone, trazodone, fluoxetine, zolpidem, myrtazine, clonazepam, quetiapine, diazepam, quetiapine. It goes on and on and on and on and on. You have the chat, you have the descriptions to see. And obviously, she wasn't consuming all of these at the same time.
Yeah, apparently she was on hardly any of
One
it.
thing this kid did was try to do what she was supposed to do. She took the drugs as she was told to take them.
What? What the heck? Huh? The heck happened there? What is going on there? What? I'll have to find another live feed.
They're witnesses. Serious suicide attempt. Remember that? Tried to kill herself. So now they'll back off on that and they'll agree.
He was just yelling at the prosecution, and the judge was like,
That's why I say, watch the evidence. Watch the manipulation. Remember the argument with the bands. She took the bands out of the bag, put the gloves on, talks to Dr. Laposada on the Zoom, slams the bands down out of the paper bag, does the movement of the bands and yells at Laposada and says, wrapped. They were just wrapped. They weren't knotted because you gotta get Lindsay tightening the band, right? You gotta hold it.
why is he doing that?
Hold it for a minute.
Oh my
You
God.
gotta hold it for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. That's why she needed the bands not knotted.
Oh my
And then she
gosh.
said, it's like this. And they sprang open. Remember that? Dr. Laposada said, yeah, I saw what you did. And she walked away like if the glove won't fit moment.
Oh
Counter
cow.
number 2.
Why is he doing that?
What did Patrick Clancy testify to? You heard his testimony. He indicated clearly, unequivocally, they were knotted around the necks of those children to the point where he had to struggle. And it's your memory, not mine. If I say something you don't recall, forget it. It's what you remember the evidence to be. But clearly, I would suggest he struggled to get it off of Dawson's over his head.
Oh my gosh, man.
And a police officer saw through the window. This is horrific stuff,
Why is he saying?
but it's objective.
Oh,
And it
I guess he's
shows
trying
the
to show how
manipulation.
gross it is that you'd have
This
to be
government-
psychotic to do it.
This prosecution is a mess. They would take their evidence and argue to you that she did not
Yes,
tie a
this is
knot
her
and
defense.
walk away, because as Dr. Laposada said, you're talking about 4, 5 seconds, so somebody passes out. No, they got to have the 4 minutes, and that's not what the evidence shows, is it? So, as we move on, Lindsay's in the hospital. And this whole thing about conversations, and she's talking to people, and the kids are in the basement. Her throat was crushed. You heard the 911 team. You draw the inference.
Her throat was not crushed. Her throat was not crushed.
Where the children are, trying to kill myself, the kids are in the basement, all that. You determine whether or not that was something that could be
That's
disturbed.
not right what
And
he's saying
the
right
police
there.
investigation, because as His Honor indicates, there are two things here. Number one, proof beyond a reasonable doubt that she's guilty, and number two, proof beyond a reasonable doubt that she was not suffering from a disease or defect, as His Honor instructed you at the time of these.
Why did he say her
Those are
throat
the
was
two
crushed?
things
Her
they have
throat
to
was
prove.
not crushed.
And when the police charge somebody with a criminal offense, they have an obligation
It was her
to
thyroid. Yes.
investigate.
That's not your throat.
So at the end of the day, when you're talking about, well, we've got the charges are before the court, you can sit there in the court, you can feel proud of yourself. Do a good investigation. You even know what this, you'll see the photograph of the cup and the powder. What is it? They don't even analyze it. Did they take pictures? Did they analyze? Did they test the blood?
What is he saying?
Lousy investigation of this.
I don't understand what this
Well,
man
that's
is trying
okay,
to
because-
achieve here.
She was guilty. And they put her in the hospital. And she's the evil woman who killed the 3 innocent kids.
He rambles
And
too
they're
much
gonna
that it
stand
sounds like
there
he's not for
while
her.
she's
It's really
chained to the
weird.
bed, paralyzed. You heard testimony from Dr. Zeisel. They weren't little fluffy cuffs that were securing her to the bed. They were handcuffs, not the medical treatment. Medical treatment would be, like restraints, so you don't do whatever, pull lines out.
What the? I have
We're
no
talking
idea
about
what he's saying.
When the big men were in there with their guns and their badges and they're sitting outside the
Oh,
door.
okay.
And they're gonna make sure that Lindsay Clancy, paralyzed, chained to the bed, doesn't get up and run away from the hospital, I guess. And they just have to suffer their way through. I guess I worked 8 hours. I had another shift. I had to work that night.
What the hell?
This is the treatment.
Oh, he's
What's
saying she was
important
treated
about
badly.
that is what kind of treatment did this young lady get from the healthcare providers? Remember Meg Collins? She came in this court, Meg, you might remember. Tall woman, short blonde hair, squared away. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. She was not only a nurse taking care of her in the hospital, she advocated for her. She stood up for her patient. She protected her. During the pandemic, you know that Meg Collins was in that emergency room when half of us were hiding at home behind our computers, hoping that we're not going to die in a week, drinking our Chardonnay at 11 o'clock in the morning. Meg Collins was in a hospital treating people and advocating for them. That's an example of what nursing is all about. Not having attitude, not treating somebody like they're to be disdained. And what's even worse, she comes out of a coma. She is intubated. She has had major surgery of her broken, crushed spine, vertebrae, rib, thyroid. Massive, not my words, medical records, massive testimony, blood transfusion for the blood loss. And when someone, you heard evidence, comes out of surgery, they are delusional. You've had anesthesia. think about having a tooth pulled. Think about the trauma that somebody has when they're in a hospital bed laying there paralyzed, unable to feel the lower half of their body, but able to feel with the meds and the pain medication and everything else, the damage to the spine.
What is
Then
going
the
on here?
hospital has
I have no
the-
idea what he's saying right
remember
now.
the other
What in the
doctor,
hell is he
I
saying?
think it was Dr. Shah, the Indian woman, wicked impressive. She was amazing. She had the facts. She was able to tell you exactly what she observed. She was able to tell you what they were doing to treat Lindsay. She treated her.
This
like
has
a
got to
human
be it, because
being.
I feel like I'm
Damn
not
good
understanding
doctor.
inside jokes or something.
Came in here and told you all of her observations about her and told you one of the things that ultimately that they were concerned about is they had to have this big confabulation about, we're going to take her off the, the healthcare process. They had to have lawyers. They had to have people there. They had to have her signing documents. They had to determine whether or not she was going to be signing something to have her parents take over because Pat was not going to be responsible for her care. Lawyers, cops, handcuffs. Do I need a lawyer? Write that down. Where are you? You're out there somewhere. Write that down. Boy, she wanted a lawyer. That's a bad thing. Must be guilty. Let's put that in the guilty pile.
Oh, I see what they're saying here.
That's why she said that. In a delirious state.
I would have said the same thing. Do I need
Dealing
like
with
that
all of these
doesn't
people.
that doesn't prove guilt.
About that issue. But what's even more nefarious, you think about it, as I said, your eye on the ball because of the manipulation. Paul Zeisel.
He's
Big
just going
deal.
through the witnesses. I see.
I'm friends with the guy. You heard evidence that I called him. I was with Pat a night or two after this incident in the bedroom with all the blood. I was with Pat taking evidence that the police didn't even see in their thorough investigation. And I was
This is
able,
the
as
thing
you
he's
know
doing.
now,
He's like,
certainly,
I'll bet you a quarter, and he's putting
to grab
quarters on the
this.
table or something like that.
Why wouldn't the police have grabbed this?
What is that? Why'd they put it on their table?
They're all empty. You can see when they were prescribed. You can see what they are. You can see what she took. You read the testimony. It's tough to take a handful of pills. Remember the guy saying that yesterday? Tough to take a handful of pills. Well, no, they were crushed. Oh, shit, they were crushed. Okay. Where's the residue? Where's the crusher? Where's anything? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
That's a good
Great
point.
investigation, guys.
That's a good point, though.
So you have a situation where they leave.
Where's the
this
residue?
behind.
Where was it crushed?
They
Where
don't
was all
even
that
look
stuff?
at it. One of them, and again, your memory don't lie. One of them testifies, well, they might have looked at it and saw it and just didn't seize it. Seriously? They go down to the kitchen, they seized every pill bottle that was in the cabinet, along with the books. And speaking of books, one of the things that they found, smoking gun. Good moms have scary thoughts. Hallelujah. Put that in the guilty pile. We're going to put this in a plastic bag. We're going to show it to a jury so they know that this young lady had scary thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out.
Wouldn't you use that for yours, though? You'd be like, she had scary thoughts. She's going through psychosis. No? I don't know.
So you have this evidence. You have evidence of sleep aids. You have evidence in the bag. Because obviously this stuff was just thrown in there. It wasn't in a bag when I saw it inside this thing here, and we seized it and we held it for 3.5 years. Anybody care about it? No. You had evidence that police knew that I had it. They could have it, they could look at it, they could analyze it, do whatever they wanted. They didn't have to.
This is true.
This here. You heard evidence.
R.I.P. to any juror who
This
has
is
ADHD.
A little wish jar that they bought on their honeymoon in Hawaii many years prior to even having kids. And when you look inside it, you see that there's all sorts of little folded up pieces of paper. Some of them are dated, some of them aren't. They go all the way back to 2017, 2018, 20. And they reference her wishes to have healthy kids her wishes for her kids to be successful, her wishes to have a good birth.
Mm-hmm.
Second time around, hoping for a good birth, worrying about the child with I forget, where they rub the thing like.
What?
This woman lived for her kids until she had the pleasure running into Dr. Tufts of her 2 months experience. And after she ran into Dr. Tufts, it was not a wonderful life anymore.
He's putting a lot of the blame on the doctors. I see what
And
he's
what
doing
did
here.
Dr. Tufts do? And everybody laughs at me. I said the television. Okay, I know it's a telemedical thing on your telephone or on a Zoom. Take more pills. You have the medical records. You heard the testimony.
There's no evidence
You
of
know
an
her
affair, everybody.
concerns.
None.
You know
Zero.
her fears. Does this seem like a young lady that didn't care and wanted to score more drugs off somebody? That's another repulsive allegation. I think the evidence is pretty clear. There's no basis for that at all. She was scared. September into October of 22, young, vibrant, hardworking. You've heard all this, not my words, witnesses' words, holding goals for herself. Hardworking.
Hell no. Not if she told me she was having thoughts like that. No, I would not.
Would take the kids to the Kingsbury Club. That's another thing. Sounds pretty snooty, doesn't it? Oh, they're at the Kingsbury Club. It's a swimming pool and a place where you can exercise. Watch the manipulation. Because now you've got a situation where you've got manipulation with the Kingsbury Club, you've got manipulation with these other items here, and you've also got manipulation.
Oh, there's another quarter.
Paul Zeisel told Lindsay what to say.
I don't get the
Say that
quarters.
you're hearing voices.
Oh,
Think
say that
about
you're hearing
how
voices.
ugly that is. Because you know, beyond a reasonable doubt, even though we don't have any proof, we have no burden. You heard from Sheila. Remember Sheila, the woman that's the reverend or whatever, she's the chaplain at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. She didn't know Lindsay from anybody that night when she came in all broken up. And she told you that she continued. She was there when Lindsay came out of, was extubated. She was there when Lindsay was going through her treatments. She was there for 8 days before Paul Zeisel even knew Lindsay existed. But they would be in here telling you that Lindsay saw the psychologist because the lawyer went and got the psychologist to go and speak to her. And then you have these guys here, the cops. They're having meetings, talking about it. They're talking about it. Must have been the shrink. Must have been the psychologist. Must have been Zeisel. He's the guy that told her what to say, and he did not. How can you ruin a man's reputation with the career that he has had and still has, thankfully, to put him in a position where he tells a broken young woman who is vilified by our society for killing her 3 children, that he goes in the hospital and tells her to say she heard voices. Disgusting. So now you know that she told Sheila first that she heard voices. Command hallucinations. She didn't say command hallucinations. I heard voices. It was a male voice. Told me, you had these other guys that came in. The government's rebuttal witnesses. Very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. The first 2, Mac, put him aside. You've got the other doctor as well. So Mac is why he was freaked out when I asked him where he stayed. And the other guy looked at me like his eyes were bugging. Why did I ask where he stayed? Whatever. Point is, they don't see her for years. Years. And why? The other guy, Halburn, I think it was Halburn, he had to wait until maybe it was the last man, I forget. They had to process his payment from the DA's office through the school. Who cares? If you have an obligation to try and be objective, to try and even look as though you're competent and objective, why would you wait for so long? Why would you go with another guy? Why would you take this young lady and have her in a room and question her one right after the other? Wouldn't you like to sit there and be questioned by Dr. Mack? Boy, that'd be an experience for 3 hours, 4 hours. And the other guy is going to pepper his questions at her as well between that period. And the next day, she can take tests and then go back at it again with Mack and with Halvern. And she was cooperative. She was pleasant. She was friendly. She answered the questions and she owned what she did. Huh? She never ran from anything. She's gone through evaluation after evaluation after evaluation, recorded. You'll have the video to look at as they're questioning her, as she's sitting there in her wheelchair, hour after hour after hour, 3 years after this incident, but that's okay. They're busy. Paul Zeisel was there, literally, in Brigham and Women's, because I called him, because I was asked to represent this young lady. You heard evidence. I saw her in the hospital. I saw her laying in the bed broken. I saw her laying in the bed practically dead. I reached out to Dr. Zeisel. I asked him, please, can you talk to this woman? Concerned, as he testified, for her mental well-being. What kind of demons, what kind of horror was in her mind as she lay there paralyzed and hurting and medicated, swollen, tubes, pops, chains. He went and talked to her. Big deal. I asked him to go. You judge the credibility of a person. Did Paul Zeisel have the ring of truth when he told you that he's there out of humane feeling to try to help this young lady? And he's been by her side for 3.5 years. Same thing as Sheila. Why would Sheila, for all this time, visit with Lindsay as she testified at the Tewksbury Hospital? She's not getting paid. She's not a hired gun. She's not somebody that's coming in to say something at my request. She loves Lindsay. He's a good kid. He's a beautiful soul. So you have Zeisel that has been with her all that time. You've got Sheila who's been with her all that time. You've got evidence that her mom and dad who lived in Connecticut come up and they stay and they visit with her and that they sit with her, and God forbid they actually sometimes had dinner. Remember that? They got the Tewksbury records. Boy, there's a good score. Let's go through the Tewksbury records and see what she's doing on the anniversary of the deaths. How about on their birthdays? Can you see them sitting there going through the medical records? Okay, doctor, what did she do then? She propelled herself down the hallway, met with her parents, laughed,
Didn't she?
had dinner, watched TV.
Isn't that the prosecution's job?
She's not curled up in the fetal position, wailing, self-flagellating constantly. For 3.5 years, she's acting like a human being trying to exist. But they go through the records and they want to get those dates and use them against her. Manipulation.
Or reality.
And then you consider we're 3 weeks away from a trial. The guy yesterday that's looking up to the
I don't
heavens
think
while
many
he's
people watch
testifying,
trials on the regular.
Caesar tells you that he wanted to establish a rapport. Can you imagine? You know that you're 3 weeks away from your murder trial, and you know that this is doctor number 3 who's been hired by the government to come in and evaluate you and testify against you, and he's going to establish a rapport. There is no rapport, but yet she was cooperative, she was friendly. Interestingly enough, just like the treating doctors.
This makes sense.
Don't talk to each other. They don't communicate with each other. They don't have access to medical records. She signs the HIPAA forms. They don't know what her records are, but they know for sure what Dr. Resnick had in his report. They know for sure what Dr. Zeisel had in his report. They know for sure what Meg Spinelli had in her report, and they incorporate that into their report. But then you have the MMPI and the other psychological tests that were administered to her on the second day of the Mac Heilbrunn team interviewing, interrogating, questioning her. She passes the MMPI. Testimony is presented. She answered the MMPI honestly. And they're pertaining to state of mind. They're pertaining to questions about what occurred. They're questioning this young lady as to what her state of mind was then, in the middle, and now. And she didn't lie. She didn't malinga. She didn't exaggerate, and more importantly, if anything, she minimizes. But she certainly was off the chart on the suicide scale. And then you have testimony from Dr. Resnick.
In my opinion, the suicide proves psychosis.
And they were paid for their testimony. We're all paid. Like I said, not the jury so much, but the judge, myself, Chrissy, everybody gets paid. These doctors came in and testified. Phil Resnick, the man is something out of a scary movie. He has the world record of investigating, examining, and treating people in psychosis that kill their children, filicide. He has a world-renowned record for checking fakers to see if a person is malingering. Their doctor agreed that his article on Voices is a leading article with research in the world. Their doctor agreed that he, Bill Resnick, is an expert on malingering. You heard him testify by Zoom because he had surgery. But he showed up by Zoom and testified that, again, 4 months after this incident, he met with Lindsay, he evaluated Lindsay, compared, looked at all the records, just like all the rest of them, everyone says, they looked at all the records, the police reports, grand jury minutes, everything else. He indicates clearly, in his opinion, that she was in a state of psychosis at the time of this death, times 3. Has any of the government doctors rebutted that? One of them, Heilbrunn, said it's possible either way. That's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The other one, Mac, you can accept his testimony if you wish, but I suggest that you probably won't. And then you're left with the doctor yesterday who didn't even know what killing during the course of the psychosis was. And when I was questioning him about it, he agreed. And I said, don't just agree with me. You're just agreeing with me because I said that? And he basically said, yeah. What kind of expert testimony is this? It's a mess. But the government uses them to try to rebut a man like Phil Resnick, who tells you that she was suffering from a horrific mental disease.
I don't think it's as easy as that. I'm pretty sure that it's not just like she said that and then you left. I think there's some nuance to that.
The how, and the fact that under the law, as His Honor has given you, she's not criminally responsible. And the burden is on them right here. Prove to you that at the time of the killing, as Dr. Resnick says, that she was suffering from a disease or defect. As Dr. Zeisel said, that she was suffering from a disease or defect. As Dr. Condi said, she was suffering from a disease or defect. And Condi took you down the road of all of these medications as a psychopharmacologist, as a doctor that specializes in prescription medications. And you got the evidence. So you're able to look at that and determine, see what the side effects are, what she was complaining of, and look at her records. I mean, they have really turned her inside out. I mean, they've got every single text, every single email, every single picture, everything that she did in college. Oh, that's another thing. She lied, according to the guy yesterday. She lied to Pat about being on Prozac. They were dating for 3 months. She's living in Boston. She meets this kid. She thinks that she might like him, and they're dating. Oh, excuse me, before you go out with me, let me tell you that about a year ago when I was studying for my exams, because I'm nervous about talking in public, I got on Prozac. Seriously? That's what the government is arguing in this case.
I guess I can see what he's doing.
Journal, which talks about her being, this is how controlling she was, manipulation. In the opening statement, you may recall that the district attorney said that she was a hard, charging, manipulating woman that was controlling, and everything in their life was controlled. And she
3 years?
To the water, to the carrots, to the beets. You look in this book, and as you might recall, Ms. Rossi testified when asked, did you feel that she was being controlling of you? Because she says, for example, Monday, 10:24, Kellen, put down for a nap. Hopefully we'll nap for 2 hours. If he wakes shortly, let him resettle himself. Bottle when he wakes up. Then it goes on and on. Make salad, romaine lettuce. He likes peppers, broccoli. Cut the sweet potatoes in chunks. Thank you, with the heart. Another good score.
Why is he so angry? Throwing shit
Look
down.
at her journals that she took. You'll see as you go along in the dates that she's recording in these journals, she's talking about the drugs that she was prescribed. And look at the first page. Look at how detailed. Dates, how she felt, 10 milligrams Prozac, and it goes on like
Holy,
that.
I didn't know
Goes
that.
through
Wow.
November into December.
Holy shit.
December.
Wow.
December 9th, 10th, 11th. Horrible, intrusive thoughts. Horrible thoughts in the AM. Horrible thoughts. Horrible thoughts. No motivation. And then finally, horrible thoughts, no motivation, deeply depressed.
Wow.
Then that's around the time she went to Women and Infants Hospital, right?
And that's why
Looking for help.
she wasn't taking a lot of the meds
Look at
too.
this. As she runs into January.
Stop
There's
slapping
nothing
shit,
other
dude.
than little chicken scratches because her mind was gone. In January, as she's on these drugs and she's suffering from what you've heard is postpartum depression that can lead to postpartum psychosis, and you have these men coming in here that don't even know psychosis from schizophrenia as experts, telling you that if a woman doesn't have these symptoms, like it's a disease, of symptoms of postpartum
Holy.
depression within 4 weeks, that's it. Lights out. You're not a person that can be considered. You're not a real person for purposes of postpartum depression and or postpartum psychosis. Well, I suggest that he's wrong. I suggest the second guy's wrong and the third guy. Well, actually, I don't even know. It's your memory. If the gentleman, Mac, even knew, I think he said 4 weeks. It can go up to a year.
He's going to slam it again.
But we don't really know because you heard the evidence. There's no evidence. There's nothing in the DSM, but that's the Bible. God forbid you should go to Europe. You should look at the World Health Organization records. You should look at the way they treat pregnant women that have problems with their children. No, we're the most advanced country in the world. But we still have doctors that come into court on a murder trial and talk about 4-week cutoff on something that they don't even know exists. They've never treated it.
This lawyer wants to get
about
a not guilty
You have
plea
terrorism experts.
on insanity,
You
and
have
if he
an
does it,
expert
he has
that
done
comes
his
in
job. That is
and
what he's
talks
trying to do,
about
not
his
get her set
focus
free.
and his interests, and it's about juveniles and drugs. And like I said, kids that like to drink and smoke weed. Those are the experts, quote unquote, to support their burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Lindsay was not suffering from a disease or defect at the time she killed her children. You all remember this. October. This is not an evidence, it's marker identification. It's too big. So, but basically it shows clearly and unequivocally the depths of despair that this young kid was in, trying to raise 3 kids, trying to be a wife, ready to go back to work. Did anyone say that she was just lazy or just didn't want to go back to work? Manipulation. They're arguing. She didn't want to go back to work. She didn't want to go back to work because she didn't want to leave her kids, especially Callan, because she loved her children. They were her life. Manipulation. And when you consider the journals,
Is that cheating?
you ever watch the movie there, The Shining, with Jack Nicholson? Remember the scene when he's sitting there in a state of complete psychosis, and he's writing a book and he's typing, and the wife finds the book and opens it up and looks at it and says, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy." Repeated after repeated after repeated. And he says, "Do you like it?" You look at the records of her Googling drugs. You look at how many times, how many hours of the night in the afternoon she's looking this stuff up, in between taking care of the family, in between all of the stuff that was going on with visiting doctors, seeing doctors, going to Rhode Island, being told, "No, we can't help you," calling a suicide hotline, "We can't help you," calling another suicide hotline, "We can't help you." My God, what does she have to do? She was reaching out for help, and she was not getting it. She turns herself in to McLean Hospital. You saw the doctor, nice woman. She's testifying. She didn't know. I suggest to you that she didn't know hardly anything, let alone psychosis involving a young lady like her going through what she was going through. The government bears the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They bring, for example, Ian Whiffen. The guy, you might remember him, was the guy that's, I guess he developed or helped develop Celebrate. What you got when you look at the records, you don't measure on an Apple Watch. Well, I shouldn't say Apple Watch because we know that they didn't have the Apple Watch, but on a cell phone. You don't measure.
This is why I believe in the psychosis thing.
Going down the stairs. You measure stair climbing, right? That's what the testimony was. And there were 3 stairs that were climbed. Okay. The last record is 5:38. At 5:38 p.m., we went through that on cross. What happens to the phone? Don't know. It was on the bed. Was it dropped on the bed and it left there for 20 minutes? She could have been anywhere in the house during all that period of time, right? Right? You've got a compressed period of time that Patrick leaves to go to the restaurant to pick up the CV, and you heard the guy yesterday say, and then she sent him off to go to CVS. It's on the way. It's on the way. She didn't want him out of the house long. She was in distress. She wanted him home to help with the bathing, to help with the kids, to help putting them to bed. How long is he going to be gone? She Googles it. Is that something that is so nefarious? You'd think that goes right along line with the book about good mothers having bad thoughts.
I don't believe that line. Sorry, no.
Patrick would take to go to 3B and
I don't believe that line.
And stop at CVS on the way. So I guess the government is suggesting she's not in a psychosis. So she's Googling Miralax because the doctor earlier that day told her that the baby needed Miralax. Why would she do that? Because remember the government's opening when they told you she wasn't suffering from the psychosis. She was a woman that didn't want to live a life anymore, wasn't happy being a mother, didn't want to live that life. So she's going to kill her kids and hopefully throw herself out the window and not paralyze herself, and then she could run off into the sunset, I guess. That's what their theory was. Along with the fact it wasn't a real good suicide, it was fake. Well, now we know, don't we? The mess that this young lady was in her brain, my brain is being damaged. I will never be better. That's the evidence. That's the evidence that we have in this case. Burden of proof is on them to prove to you that at the time that she killed these 3 beautiful kids, that she just wanted to move on with her life. I suggest to you, just as there's no chicken nugget residue, and then when you look at those photographs, there's a slice of a cucumber, there's a slice of a carrot, there's no chicken nuggets in that bowl. Patrick wouldn't know what the kids were eating. She was the one that would cook their dinner. She was in the refrigerator, but the guy yesterday is like, oh no. Patrick said that the child was eating the chicken McNuggets in the bowl. No, she was getting food out for the two kids, not the little baby, two kids for dinner. There's no evidence that she's lying. There's no evidence that she's malingering. And finally, remember, there was a big deal about whether or not the voices are within the head or whether or not they're outside of the head. Dr. Resnick's article with the largest research on voices malingering in the world indicates that 38%.
Either way, guys, she ends up in the
almost
hospital.
1,000 people.
Innocent,
that were
guilty.
examined
She ends up back where she is for the rest of her life.
from
This is
inside
all
their head.
theater.
And it stops. You're going to buy that guy yesterday? He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Mm.
This young lady is not guilty of the killing of her children because she was suffering from a disease and defect, as His Honor instructed you. And they're not going to be able to prove otherwise. And it's their burden, not ours. Thank you.
Okay. Geez, do we applaud or what happens here? Or I don't know.
Hi, come on.
All right, here comes the lady from the prosecution. What's up, Mom?
There's no dispute that Lindsay Clancy was suffering from mental illness and that she tried to kill herself. There's no dispute about that. All of the evidence that you've heard, even the experts that the Commonwealth put before you, say that she was suffering from mental illness and she tried to kill herself. That's not the issue in this trial. The issue is whether at the time she killed Cora, Dawson, and Callan, she knew the difference between right and wrong, and whether she could conform her behavior to the requirements of the law. This case is not about our mental health system or how it treats women or what's in the DSM-5 and what's not. That's a distraction to get you angry and passionate about an important issue, but an issue that's not on trial here. What's on trial here, what the issue is here, is what Lindsay Clancy did the night of January 24th, 2023, and what her mental state was at the time. And you can use her psychological history and records, the treatment records, to look at both before and after she killed the kids, to look at how she got to that point, what her thought process was, what her motivation was. But it's not the system or the DSM or any of that that caused her to strangle her kids. In fact, she had more access to treatment and care and support than a lot of people do. She had health insurance that covered multiple doctors, multiple specialty programs, treatment at South Shore, at Mass General, her stay at McLean. She had prescription coverage to cover the different trials she went through. She had support at home. She had 18 weeks of maternity leave with the opportunity to extend that as much as she needed, which is excellent, which is what all women should have. But she had that. She had support from both sides of her family, hers and Patrick's. The two older kids, Cora and Dawson, were in preschool 3.5 days a week. And she had the nanny, Elaine, who helped with Callan 3 mornings a week. And she also helped her with housework and with food prep. This wasn't a woman suffering from a lack of care, a lack of resources. She had an abundance of help, an abundance of care. She had all of that and more. And, you know, this doesn't mean that she wasn't struggling, that she wasn't dealing with with mental health issues. She had depression. And whether that's from
This
bipolar or major depressive disorder or postpartum depression, it all boils down to she was depressed, right? And she was trying to deal with that, trying to get help for that. But it wasn't the fault of the providers that she was struggling with this or that she wasn't getting better. They were doing the best they could. You have the records, you heard the testimony. They were doing the best they could with the information she provided them. And that wasn't always accurate information. That wasn't always the full picture. And they were doing the best they could with her level of cooperation and compliance with the plan. Take her medications. You know from the records and from the pill bottles what she was prescribed and how she was supposed to take those medications. And you know from the pill bottles what she actually took. And sometimes those two things didn't align with what she told her providers, what she told Patrick, what she told her mother. You take the Zoloft, for example. The prescription was for one 25 milligram pill a day for 7 days, and then to go up to the 50 milligrams after 7 days. She told Dr. Tufts that she took the pills as prescribed for 7 days, went up on the 8th day to 50 milligrams, and that's when she had
probably
the insomnia
mint.
and the other side effects and symptoms.
Those
She
are
told
candies.
Patrick that she took the pills for 7 days and they had no effect. So she called Dr. Tufts, who then told her to increase the dose. Well, you know what she told Patrick is not accurate because the pill bottle says, take it for a week and then increase it. That was the plan from the beginning. That wasn't the result of a phone call to Dr. Tufts. And you know what she told Dr. Tufts isn't accurate either because only 7 pills were taken from the bottle. So that leaves you two options. Either she took the medication as prescribed, 1 pill a day for 7 days, and then didn't increase it, which she says is what caused the side effects and the insomnia, or what she did was not take it as prescribed.
No,
She didn't do it
she
7
should not have
days and
testified.
ease into it and then increase it. She either missed a dose or increased it early before she was supposed to. Either scenario is not good. She knows as a nurse the importance of following the instructions of your medications. She knows how important it is to follow the plan and do what's on the bottle and do what your provider tells you and to give that accurate information to your provider.
Yep.
She didn't
Dads
say
can
I
take
went up a dose,
paternity
went
leave
up to
too.
50 too early. Maybe they could have adjusted that and tried the 25 milligram for longer and eased her into it. But no, she told her that she did what she was told and then went up and had these problems. So you can see that in a lot of the medication she has. You have the pill bottles that were turned in by Patrick, and a lot of them don't even have many pills missing from the bottles. Some of them have none. The Buspar prescription, the first one, there's only 2 pills missing. The second prescription, no pills missing. The Lamictal, she never took those pills at all until the night she tried to kill herself. So there's a lack of compliance there, a lack of follow-through, a lack of communication with her providers about what was happening with her and how she was taking the medications. And defense wants you to believe that this is a woman who's begging for help and willing to do anything and everything her providers tell her to do to get better. And she was asking for help. She wanted help. She wanted to get better. But she wanted to get better on her own terms, doing things her way, the way she thought she should do them. And as a nurse, she knew that's not the right way to approach it. She knew that an accurate medical history, accurate information about your side effects and symptoms, what your thoughts are, that's important for your providers to know. And she didn't do it. And it seems that the reason that she's not necessarily fully compliant and she's doing what she wants to do is she has this desire to be herself again. She just wants to go back to who she was, and she wants it now. And she doesn't want any side effects. She just wants to be herself again and wants it now. And that's understandable. That's relatable to want to get that magic pill that will fix you immediately and you can go back to being yourself. But she knew that's not how it worked. And you know that's what she was thinking, because in the searches on her phone, she's searching for things like, which antidepressant works the fastest? How fast does Wellbutrin work? And she's searching all of these different medications for the side effects and symptoms, some of them that she never even
Well,
discusses
she
with her
tried.
doctors. And, you know, again, it's relatable that she wants to get back to where she was, but she had discussions with her providers about how these medications work and that it takes time for them to get into your system, and it takes time for them to work. She even texted her mother about that, about how she knew that she had to be patient, that it took weeks for the amitriptyline, for example, to get into her system and worked. And she knew all of this, and she couldn't be patient. She couldn't wait. She wanted it faster. She even told Dr. Tufts, it's a note in the records, that she knew the problem was that she wasn't focusing on one provider and following one plan. She knew that going from doctor to doctor, practice to practice, South Shore to MGH, to different programs, not the best way to deal with the situation. She said it in her own words to Dr. Tufts, I need to stick with one provider and stick with one plan to see if it works. And she actually turned down help from at least 2 locations at various points. We talked a lot about the women and infants records, and you know, you don't have to believe what I say about them or the witnesses say about them or defense. You can look at the records themselves. Page 9, it says right there, Patrick was the one who said over medication was the issue. Not the doctors there, not the people evaluating her. What they put was depression, RO, rule out adverse medication effects. That means they have to look into it to see if medication's a problem. But there's a difference between an adverse effect, a symptom, or a problem with a medication and being over medicated, taking too much of a medication or taking too many at one time. There's a difference there. And women and infants never said she was over medicated. What they also don't do is turn her away. It's not that she went there and they said, can't help you, go away. They told her, it's in the records, based on the onset of her symptoms, they weren't sure if it was postpartum or peripartum. They saw she had an issue. They wanted to help her. It says there, we offered her. They offered her 3 programs. They offered her the inpatient medical management program. They offered her a partial hospitalization program for general mental health. And they offered her an outpatient program. It shows they put a lot of thought into that, into offering her this care. When they gave her 3 separate options, considering she's a young mom, maybe she doesn't want to be away from home, but we'll give her the option of being in the hospital and getting her medications right. But we'll also give her the option of the partial hospitalization where she can, be here during the day and go home to her kids in the evening. And then that third option of being an outpatient and being able to be at home with her kids and come in for appointments. It was very thoughtful of them. It was very well planned out to give her these 3 options. And it's kind of the exact opposite of just turning someone away and saying, go away, we can't help you. And her response, I'm going to talk to my provider about it for guidance. And she goes to Dr. Tufts. She sees Gelada at some point. You look at the records, she never discussed those options with them. She told them that women and infants turned her away and said she didn't qualify for the program. She didn't discuss those 3 programs that they offered her. So basically, they give her this offer of help, 3 different forms of help, and she's just, no, doesn't want to do them and doesn't discuss it with her provider. And also that first time she goes to Mass General, to the emergency room, they offer her a bed at McLean, and she turns it down. She wants help. No one's saying she doesn't want help, but she's making these decisions and doing these things that aren't helping her get help, that are turning away help, because she wants the help in a certain way, in a certain time frame. And, all during this time, between September and December of 2022, she's interacting with friends, with family, teachers, gym staff, the nanny, people at gymnastics, interacting with them in public spaces, in public ways, driving her kids around, all throughout that time, able to know the difference between right and wrong, able to conform her behavior to the law and to the requirements of society, and interacting with others and presenting herself as a functioning adult, a functioning mom. You know that she knew the difference between right and wrong during that time because she had those thoughts at the beginning of December of harming her kids. And she told Patrick and her mother about them. But who she didn't tell is important and very telling. She didn't tell a single provider, not Tufts, not Gelada, not Jennifer McAllister, not Dukes, no one at McLean, no one at MGH, no one at South Shore, didn't tell any of them. And why? Because the police might take away her kids. That's a rational thought, that telling mandated reporters that you're having a thought of harming your kids, that they might be taken away for their safety, that's a rational thought. And it also shows she knew it was a bad thought, a wrong thought, because you don't think someone's going to take your kids away because you're thinking something positive or neutral. It's because it's bad, it's because it's wrong, it's because it's against the law. So she knew that it was wrong. And she was able to conform her behavior to the law because she didn't tell those providers. She went in and met with them and talked about what she was experiencing and talked about her depression. And not only did she not tell them, she lied to them. They asked her, are you having thoughts of harming others? Do you have homicidal ideation? She told Tufts no. She told Gelada no. She told Dukes no. She told Goodhart no.
Oh, she's repeating
Every
a lot of
day
this.
at McLean, she said no. At MGH, she said no. So not only is she hiding it, she's lying about it. She's controlling her behavior. She's controlling the presentation she presents to her providers. And then we get to her being admitted to McLean. You know, up to that point, all of the drugs she's taken from September through December, they weren't given at the same time. The most she ever had at one time was 2 to 3 medications. And usually if it was 3, that third medication was the Benadryl or the hydroxyzine that's like Benadryl, or the Ativan or Valium as needed for anxiety. But most of the time it was 2 medications. And the way they did those medications, you heard from Dr. Satoff, a man who's examined thousands of patients with psychosis, who's treated women with postpartum psychosis, who's treated women who have killed their children, that man who apparently has no expertise. You heard from him that the medication trials were reasonable and rational. She tried a medication, it didn't work, or they had side effects, they stopped the medication. They tried something else. They tried a different combination. And unfortunately, with mental health, there's no blood test or CAT scan or MRI that you can do that says, well, you have bipolar or you have schizophrenia. It unfortunately doesn't work like that. So what the providers have to do is rely on what the patient's telling them. Hope that information is accurate. Rely on what they're observing about the patient and make a diagnosis. And then based on that diagnosis, have a treatment plan. And every patient reacts differently to medication. One patient could do fine on it, the next not. So they have to do that trial and error process, and it's normal, it's typical, it's reasonable. And that's what they did for her. And even if you believe that the number of different medications she took over that time or the combination of those medications affected her negatively, after McLean, they were out of her system. Some of them had been out of her system for months. Zoloft, she stopped in October. Other pills she stopped in November or December. And that last one, the Seroquel, that she really had a bad reaction to, is out of her system. The only medication she's on leaving McLean is trazodone for sleep and Valium for anxiety. And that's it when she leaves there. And why does she leave there? She wants to go to Corey's birthday party. And that's relatable, that's understandable. She wants to be that mom again who can throw her daughter a party and enjoy it. It's completely understandable why she would want to leave, but she also knew she wasn't there. She knew how she was feeling. She knew she was depressed. She knew she needed help. But she wanted to be that mom she was more. And there was nothing McLean could do to keep her there. She said she denied suicidal ideation. She denied homicidal ideation. She said she wasn't hearing voices or seeing anything. They saw the entire time she was there no signs of psychosis. In fact, every doctor she saw, from Tufts in September all the way through Tufts at January 23rd, none of them saw any signs of psychosis ever. So they're all wrong. All these different doctors at all these different practices, they're all collectively together wrong. That doesn't make sense. But she shows when she's leaving McLean, no signs of psychosis. And they even give her a task to do to see if she can manage her mental health outside of the hospital. Make an appointment, pick a doctor, make an appointment. And she does it. She decides on Dr. Tufts. She makes the follow-up appointment. She gets the documentation and gives it to them, showing she can manage her mental health. They have to let her go at that point. She's there voluntarily. There's no grounds to keep her if she's not showing she's a danger to herself or others. So they let her go home. And at home, again, all throughout January, she's showing her ability to know right from wrong and to conform her behavior to the requirements of the law in all the activities she does in January. First, there's the birthday party. She's throwing the birthday party. She's monitoring the kids, making sure, typical mom birthday party stuff. Everyone's eating, getting cake, singing happy birthday. You saw her in the video. She appeared happy and smiling, normal. Everyone that interacted with her said, seemed a little tired, but okay. The Museum of Science, you have that video. The Museum of Science in Boston can be crowded and overwhelming on a good day. And she's there with 3 kids under 5 with her husband. You see her monitoring them, caring for them, doing the exhibits, showing them what to do with the exhibits. If you watched that video and you didn't know who the Clancy family was, and we asked you, pick out the woman who is depressed, pick out the woman who wants to kill herself, pick out the woman who's about to kill her kids, you couldn't pick her out. She's completely calm. All her behaviors are typical and normal because she's able to control her behavior. She's able to be suicidal and feel those things, but control her behavior, control her thoughts, and present that image to the world. She's able to do it at the Cape Codder as well, similar scenario. She's able to watch the kids when Patrick goes to brunch. She's able to watch the boys when Patrick and Cora go skiing on the 16th. She's able to interact with the Carneys on January 22nd. And yeah, they both initially said she was quiet, but then they both admitted she was always kind of quiet. But she was able to interact with them, chat with them in the kitchen, seemed okay. In between January 7th and January 21st, her mother never comes to the house to intervene. Her sister, a licensed social worker, a mandated reporter, never comes to the house to intervene or help, never makes a report. And they're in contact with her every day, texting with her, calling with her almost every day, and never see any signs that they should be concerned or worried or intervene. And you have those text messages between the defendant and her mom. And her mom obviously was very attentive, very caring, asked very pointed questions. How are you doing? How are you sleeping? How are the medications? Obviously, a very concerned, loving mom. How does Lindsay answer? I'm getting a little better. I'm sleeping better. She said the only time her sleep was interrupted is if Cora had a bellyache or one of the kids was up. But she's doing better every day. She's sleeping better. She's feeling better. She still says, I'm not myself. I'm not where I want to be, but she's moving in the right direction. And we have that text from her mom the day she leaves on the 22nd, headed back home. I'm glad to see you're doing so much better. Now her mom now wants you to believe that she lied to her, that she wasn't doing better and she was just trying to encourage her. But there are so many things you can say to your daughter who's struggling with mental health other than lie to her if you want to encourage her. You've got this. Take it day by day. I'm here for you. We're going to get through this. But she wants you to think she lied to her when she said she was doing better. But you know that wasn't a lie. You know that she was doing better, or seemed to be, and that her mom said, I'm glad you're doing so much better, because Patrick said the same thing. He said she was doing better in January. Every day was better. The 24th was the best day. They had hope, because that's what she wanted to show them. The only person during that time that she gave even a little glimpse of maybe she wasn't doing that much better was Dr. Tufts. And she told Dr. Tufts that she was feeling depressed, which is why Dr. Tufts prescribed the 10 milligrams of amitriptyline a day, very low dose. And then she told Dr. Tufts again, still not helping. And so Dr. Tufts raised it to the 20 milligrams. Again, a very low dose, a dose a child could take. And that shows how cautious and conservative Dr. Tufts was being in the treatment of this patient who had had those interactions with medications previously. She was being cautious and conservative and acting with care for the patient by slowly increasing the medication. But even with Dr. Tufts, she still denied having a suicide plan, denied wanting to hurt anyone else, denied voices, denied visual hallucinations, showed no signs of psychosis, all the way up to January 23rd, nothing. And if you look at their journal, you look at this journal that defense counsel showed you, she's very detailed, excuse me, about when she took medication, what she took, the amounts she took, what the effect was for months, starting in October and going all the way up to January. And where it stops, January 18th. Someone who's been so meticulous about everything all the way up to January 18th, and it just stops. And it's as if she's decided she's done trying. She's decided that it's too much and she doesn't want to do it anymore. And so she just stops keeping track of the prescriptions. And then we get to January 24th. Everything that happened that day, every person she interacted with, every situation she was in, shows you she knew the difference between right and wrong, and she could conform her behavior to the law. The doctor's appointment first thing in the morning. She's able to drive there. She's able to interact with medical professionals. She's able to seem absolutely fine and normal. And this is a doctor who's treated the kids since Cora was.
This is so boring.
This is a pediatrician who's known the family and has known Lindsay for almost 5 years. A woman who's trained in recognizing the signs of postpartum depression. She told you she looks for flat affect, she looks for teariness, and some other things that she told you. She saw none of that. She was able to control herself and interact with her in a perfectly normal, concerned mother way. Able to get home from that appointment. She plays with the kids, she takes them outside, she's sending those messages and photos to her mom and to Patrick, basically saying, look, this is a good day. I'm having a good day. Everything's good. I'm getting better. Here's proof. This is what I'm doing. You start to see the planning at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When this is on her phone, you can see her search for
Here we go.
Kids Miralax at 4:02. And then a little while later at 4:13, you see her search for takeout from 3V. And then immediately after, she does the Apple Maps search to see how long it takes to get to 3V. Well, defense wants you to believe that, she was checking that because she didn't want him gone for too long. She wanted him home. She was in distress. If you're in distress, don't send him anywhere. Make food at home, have him cook,
That's
get delivery, get DoorDash. Go to one of the other restaurants that Patrick mentioned that were 2 minutes down the road. And she didn't have to look up on Apple Maps to see where this restaurant was. You heard from Patrick. They had been there at least 3 times in the months before. She had lived in that area for 4 years. She knew where it was. She knew generally how long it would take to get there. What she needed to know was how long specifically on that night it would take to get there, because she knew she would have a limited amount of time to do what she wanted to do. And what she had decided to do was to kill the children and then kill herself.
How do you fight this
And so
argument?
she needed to know, not generally, but exactly how much time will I have. And then obviously sees that that's not enough time. So then she searches CVS. And not only does she search CVS, she calls them and asks them if they have kids Miralax, and they say no, but they have Pedialax and one other medication. And then she asks, is it in stock?
Is that true?
Because she needs to know not only what they have, but is it in stock? Because she's adding to this errand that she's sending Patrick out on. And she has to make sure she's not interrupted. She doesn't want that call at 5:33. She wants him to go to CVS and have the medication there and get it, and then go on to 3V, so she has time to do what she needs to do. So that's why she's calling to see what they have and make sure it's in stock. It's a level of planning there and thinking and decision-making that Dr. Satoff referenced. And then after that, she texts Patrick, it's been a long day, can we do 3V? And he's on board with that. And she's like, okay, check out the menu, let's get on this. And he asks her what she's getting. She tells him the Mediterranean Power Bowl. He says he's getting the pork belly risotto. 5:10 p.m., she's calling that order in. She's talking to the hostess. She gets the order accurate. She is able to answer questions about how she wants her food. She's able to recall and give Patrick's phone number and his name as the person picking up. And then Patrick's leaving to go get the food. And as he's leaving, the kids are in the living room on the couch eating. The defendant's in the doorway near the basement door. And she says to him, oh, by the way, can you go to CVS? Acting like it's this last minute thought, like, oh, by the way, can you get this? And not something that she's been planning for over an hour. She knew about the Pedialax and she knew about 3D and she knew all of that before she even asked him about dinner. But it's like, oh, can you go to CVS on your way and get kids Pedialax? And he, of course, is like, sure, I'll get that. And he heads out the door at 5:15. And that's the time he leaves, because he says to her, yeah, just text it to me. And that's such a normal kind of interaction that we have in your common sense of life experience. You're headed out the door to run an errand and someone in your home says, oh, while you're out, could you get me X, Y, and Z? And you're like, yeah, sure, just text it to me. Because you don't want to get there and be like, oh, what did they want me to get? It's such a normal interaction, right? Can you get this for me? Sure, text it to me. And he heads out the door and she texts it to him at 5:15 p.m. And then he goes to CVS. Even though she's told him what to get and they have it, he still makes that call at 5:33. She calls him back at 5:34. And then he heads out to 3V and then comes home. And when he gets home, puts the things on the counter, and it's quiet. It's quiet in a way that a house with 3 kids under 5 should not be during waking hours. So he calls out to them, no answer. He goes to the basement door and opens it and yells down, and no answer. And he closes the door. He calls her phone, no answer. He goes upstairs and is able to unlock the door and see the blood and see the window open and go down to her. And when he goes down to her, she's no longer actively bleeding. He doesn't have to put pressure on any of her wounds. And he says to her, what did you do? And her response is, I tried to kill myself. And then it's, where are the kids? In the basement. It's not, I heard a voice, I was compelled to do this, I didn't want to do this. Go help the kids. They're hurt, they're in the basement, go save them. No. It's, I tried to kill myself, and the kids are in the basement. And defense wants you to believe that conversation couldn't have happened because of how she sounded on the 911 call. But you heard from the doctors, people
Why is there so much
over time.
misinformation about the fact that she
wasn't.
wasn't talking on the 911
And as
call
that
when
progresses,
everybody in court
she's losing the
agrees
ability
that
to
she
talk.
was talking on the
There's nothing
911
in the
call?
medical records about her throat being crushed or her thyroid being crushed. You can look at that. Her thyroid was bruised, her vertebrae were broken, but her throat wasn't crushed. She had the ability to make sound and to communicate. And if you listen to the 911, he's talking to her, and then he's answering the 911 dispatchers about what she said. So even if we can't hear her clearly and we can't understand what she was saying, he could.
So we can't hear her on the call, but he could. That's what they're saying. Like,
You know,
he
from
can
all
hear
of the
her.
evidence that you have, putting aside the experts, but all the evidence you have in terms of crime scene photos and videos and the
Gonna sip of coffee.
witness testimony and all the medical records, you know how she killed them, where she killed them, what time she killed them, and the order that she killed them in. Even without what she told the doctors about the order, that's something you can infer from the evidence. Because you know, in order to bring the kids to the basement and strangle each one of them, and then come upstairs and get a knife and have a phone call, and then go upstairs to the second floor and either take handfuls of pills or crush them, however she did it, take the pills, and then cut herself. And it's not just 3 cuts, it's the hesitation marks, and then the cuts themselves. And then you know she bled in a couple spots for a little while, because you heard from Sherry Crook how the pooling in front of the mirror is someone, basically the blood dropping down and someone there for a period of time. And then over closer to the window, the same thing. So she's bleeding in front of the mirror for a period of time, over by the window for a period of time. And then she goes out of the window. And whether she dove out or climbed out and slid down, whatever you think that evidence shows from the shingles and everything you've seen, whatever happened, she goes out of the window and she's on the ground. And by the time Patrick gets there, she's no longer bleeding. So for all of that to happen in that short amount of time while Patrick's gone, she had to have started killing the kids immediately after he left. Now, defense wants you to believe that it was after the phone call, that after the phone call, she heard the voice and killed the children. But there's a few things about that don't make sense. First is what she told Dr. Satoff, that when she gets the call, she's at the fridge getting chicken nuggets out of the fridge to make dinner. You heard from Patrick, when he's leaving, Dawson is sitting on the couch eating chicken nuggets and green beans out of a bowl. There's the crime scene photo of 2 bowls on the couch. Yes, the pink one seems to have some vegetables in it, but there's the blue one there as well. And Patrick saw Dawson eating the chicken nuggets and green beans. So why would the defendant make that up? Why would she say she's doing that during the phone call? Because if she's already killed the kids because of a voice and being compelled and it being against her will and she's like a puppet, then she can't get a call and miss it and then call the person back and have a conversation and then hang up. A puppet can't do those things. Those are decisions and choices and actions that she's controlling. So she has to explain away the phone call because her behavior and her ability to have the phone call don't make sense if she's being compelled by her voice, if she's not in control. And you, further on that, you have the phone. You have the flights climbed. There were 2 flights climbed. You can see, you have Ian Whiffin's report. You can see there were 2 flights climbed. The first ends at 5:33. So it makes sense that she has killed the kids in the basement and she has come up the stairs, and at 5:33, she's in the kitchen and she's getting the knife. And then Patrick calls. Everything she's done, everything from the research to making sure what they had, to telling him to get it, to making sure it's in stock, all of that, and he still calls her, he still interrupts her. And then she gets the knife and she goes upstairs, and she's at the top of the stairs by 5:38. So the phone calls from 5:33 to just before 5:35. So if you want to believe that the voice happened after the call, and the killing of the kids happened after the call, between 5:33 and 5:38, she doesn't go down and come back up and come back up and come back up. There's nothing on that phone about that. And there wouldn't be enough time for her to bring those kids down to the basement and strangle each one in 3 minutes. You heard from the doctors, and Dr. Lapisato included, it could take up to 30 seconds
I don't know. You could be in
for
this
each child to go
scenario
unconscious.
without being medicated. So I bet she is medicated.
And then strangulation would have to continue for another 1 to 2 minutes to cause death. And Dr. Lapisato wanted you to believe that the band could just stay there around their necks by themselves. But you have the bands. They're exercise bands. You pull them, they resist, you let go, they snap back. I had to hold them up to show her in circles like around someone's neck. And when I let go, they expanded. They don't stay around someone's neck on their own. You have to pull them. And you know they weren't knotted. Patrick never testified that they were knotted. So I'll take this one. He testified that he didn't have
taking
a
the
clear
quarters
memory,
back. Damn,
but
she's taking the quarters
he
back.
remembered that they were possibly looped. And I asked him, like, when you're tying your shoe, that first loop before you do a bow? And he said, yeah, kind of like that. So not knotted, not tied, but even his memory wasn't the best. You heard him on that call. And that's why we had to play the call for you, because you could hear him. You could hear when he found each kid. And you knew that he had the phone with him when he found each kid, because his voice, it never sounded like he was in another room. It always sounded so painfully right there. And so you know he's holding the phone and he's not untying knots, and he wouldn't have had the time to untie knots in that short amount of time. And then you have the firefighters looking in the window, seeing him with Dawson, and he's not untying a knot or unlooping something. They say they see him in an unwinding motion, unwrapping. That's why you had to listen to the 911, to show that she did stand over their limp bodies and strangle them for 1 to 2 minutes after they went unconscious. Because those weren't knotted, they weren't tied. They don't just stay there on their own. And even if you wanted to believe that at 5:38, she goes upstairs and puts the phone on the bed, and then she goes down and kills the kids, and she does everything. 5:38 to just after 6 p.m., because he's making the call to her at 6:09. There's not enough time between 5:38 and just after 6 p.m. to kill all 3 kids, to get the knife, to take the pills, to cut herself, to bleed, to go out of the window, to stop bleeding, and Patrick to get there. In 20 odd minutes, it's not enough time. So you know she killed those kids as soon as he left. And when she got the call from him, she had already strangled them. And she didn't tell him. She didn't ask for help. She didn't say, oh my God, what have I done? She's a nurse. She didn't go down and try to do CPR and help them. No, she lied. She stayed calm. She presented herself as normal. She had complete control over her behavior and her emotions. She had a normal conversation with him because she didn't want him coming home, because she needed to finish her plan. She still had to kill herself. So why did she do it?
This is it. Where's the motive? What's the motive? What's the motive?
A mother who was this good, who loved her kids this much, which we're not denying, would never harm her kids this way unless she was so mentally ill that she was hearing these command voices and had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that's not the world we live in. Dr. Resnick told you, most women who kill their children do it in child abuse. Most women who kill their children don't do it because of mental illness. Mothers kill their children, and it's horrible and it's awful, but it happens.
Guys,
So why
list
did
what you
she
think the
specifically
motive
do
could
it?
be in the comments
She was
section.
depressed.
If you think she's guilty
She was
of not psychosis, what do you think the
exhausted. She
motive
was
could be?
done. She didn't want to try anymore. She felt damaged. But those kids were her protective factor. Those kids were keeping her from ending her misery. And so she had to remove the protective factor. And I'm not saying she was happy about it. I'm saying that it was what she had to do to end her misery. But it was a choice. It was a choice. She could have kept trying. She could have, moved down to her mother's. She could have killed herself and left her kids alive. But it was a choice to take them with her. It was a horrible choice. And it's
She's
a
not-
choice that
she's not laying out a good
we
motive
don't want
here.
to think about that a mother could make, because that doesn't make us feel safe or comfortable in this world. But it's a choice she made. She knew it was wrong because she sent Patrick out to do it. She could conform her behavior because she waited until he was gone and didn't tell him what was going on those phone calls, didn't call 911 for help, didn't lock herself in a bathroom upon hearing this voice. She knew it was wrong. She didn't take advantage of this situation.
She's not laying out a motive.
She created this situation, this opportunity to do what she wanted.
Motive was depression.
And when she woke in the hospital and she knew she was alive and the kids weren't, she knew what she did was wrong. She said she felt horrified. And then, while still with a tube in her throat, she's asking, do I have a lawyer? And it's not what defense said. It was after surgery and she's
How
delirious.
could the motive
Look
be
at
that she didn't want to be a mother when
She
all
had
the
surgery on
records
the
say that she
27th.
loved being a mother?
She's asking if she has a lawyer on the 26th. Do I have a lawyer? Because she knows what she did was wrong. And then we get the justification, the excuse of the voice. And there are a few reasons why the voice doesn't make sense.
This lady did not lay out a motive, by the way.
The first
None.
is she immediately obeyed it. Dr. Resnick, their expert, the one who knows everything about postpartum psychosis, he teaches other psychiatrists and psychologists. He writes books and chapters and articles about how this is a huge red flag if someone immediately obeys a voice. You heard him talk about Andrea Yates, about how she heard voices
I didn't hear
to
one.
kill her children for months. And what did she do? She committed herself 5 times. She tried to kill herself twice to avoid harming her children.
What's going on?
But it said that was all accurate.
Something's
Let's
going
move
on.
on from that.
Why? What the hell?
Lindsay
Why can't
Clancy
what?
hears his voice one time and doesn't.
Why are we moving on from that? Why can't she say what she needs to say?
Lock herself in the bathroom, call Patrick, call 911. Doesn't try to leave. Leaving little children alone for 20, 30 minutes, not the greatest option, but it's better than killing them. She doesn't try any tactics to avoid the voice. She just obeys.
That's a
Another
good point.
red flag that Resnick was asked about and teaches and writes about
Oh, okay.
is that she only heard the voice one time. She never heard it before, and she hasn't heard it since.
Why not?
That's not how that works. It's a red flag that she's making up the voice. Another one is that what she said, the voice told her isn't consistent. At the hospital, she says the voice said, you have to kill your children so you can kill yourself because they'll suffer without you. What she tells a lot of the doctors is, it says, this is your last chance. You have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself. And then she tells the chaplain, a third version, you have to kill the kids so you can kill yourself because they're in danger. There's these 3 different versions. Another red flag, it doesn't make sense that she's saying the voice says all these different things. And then the fourth thing that doesn't make sense about the voice is that it's vague in its command. It doesn't tell her how to kill the kids, where, with what, nothing. It says kill the kids so you can kill yourself. So she had to choose where, the basement. She had to choose how, strangulation. She had to choose with what, exercise ban. Choose again, exercise ban. Choose again, exercise ban. She had to choose how to kill herself. Now, if you're being compelled by this voice and you have no free will whatsoever, you're just your body's acting on the voice, why wouldn't you just kill yourself the same way you killed the children? You strangled them, you hang yourself. That's acting on compulsion. That's no
what?
choice.
That's weird that she's saying that. What?
3 different ways. And none of them similar to what happened to the kids. And I'll take this other quarter now
Oh,
and explain to you why we got into the superficiality of the wounds and why we got into the height of the window and why we got into how she didn't take enough pills to actually kill herself. We're not saying she didn't want to kill herself. We're talking about that third prong of suicidality that Dr. Satov talked about. Remember, he talked about aloneness and feeling burdensome, but that third category, capability. She wanted to kill herself, but her natural instinct to live was fighting against that.
the quarter thing is
So
that
she took pills,
her
but
lawyer
you heard the
was
toxicologist.
like, here are my
They were
points,
all at therapeutic
and this is what
levels
they're
or
going to do.
below,
And he's like
except the
betting
Seroquel,
that they
which is
won't
a
be able to
little
beat him or
elevated.
something like that. And then she's taking the
cut
quarter back
herself.
saying, I win this one.
But you saw the cuts on the meaty part of her arm horizontally. No arteries, no major blood vessels. Didn't need to be stitched the next day. The one on her neck didn't need to be stitched at all. She knew as a nurse, those weren't going to kill her, but she was trying. And then going out of the window, 12, 13 feet. She landed the wrong way and ended up paralyzed on the frozen ground. But, the idea that falling out of a 12-foot window is going to definitely kill you, not necessarily. And so she wanted to, she was trying in all these different ways, but she just couldn't get over that third prong, the capability of actually killing herself. And that goes against it being a voice. Because if she's compelled to do it, if this voice is making her do it, she would just do it. There would be no fight. There would be no struggle. There would be no resistance to dying. But there was. I guess the third one is Dr. Zeisel.
Oh, here comes a quarter.
We've never said that he told the defendant what to say. Not one witness, not one piece of evidence. The only person that said that Dr. Zeisel, that we were trying to say Dr. Zeisel told her to make up the voice is defense counsel. He's the only one that asked about it. He's the only one that brought it up. We have never said that in this courtroom, and no witness has said that we've asked. She knew what she did was wrong. She could conform her behavior to the law and chose not to. And she didn't expect to have any consequences because she expected to die with her children. And we get to what we have to prove is that first degree is deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity and cruelty. You know it was deliberate premeditation because of the way she killed them and the way they died. And the order also shows a rationality. The order she killed them in. Because Cora and Dawson are older. If she had tried to strangle one in front of the other, they would have known this is bad. And they would have tried to intervene or run and hide. And she had a very limited time. She didn't have time to try to find a child who ran off and hid. So taking Dawson first and moving him to a separate room, having Cora stay with Callan and having Dawson go in another room, that's rational. That makes sense. That's ordered thinking. And we didn't show you that post that she made about Dawson being a handful and not being compliant to show she was a bad mom. We showed it to you because it proves she knew that he was a handful. She knew that he was less likely to be compliant, to just go along. She knew that he might struggle. And so it made sense rationally to remove him and separate him first and kill him first. And she brought him into that room, into the office, and closed the door. And she wrapped that band around his little neck.
Ah, jeez.
And she squeezed until he was unconscious. As the blood's pooling in his
Oh
face
my gosh.
and causing those blood vessels to burst.
You really have to say it like that?
Causing him pain and panic and confusion. And defense calls Dr. La Posada to say, no, it wasn't 20 or 30 seconds. It was only 5 or 10 seconds until he went unconscious. I'm sorry, how many seconds is it okay for them to have been in pain and panic and confusion? How about it wasn't okay for 1 second for any of those children to feel that?
Yeah.
And they all felt it, all for up to 30 seconds. And then she continued strangling their limp bodies for 1 to 2 minutes to make sure they were dead. Deliberate premeditation. And then extreme atrocity and cruelty.
Give me anxiety, man.
The indifference that she showed to their pain, to their struggle, to their suffering, leaving them there on the floor with the bands around their necks, completely indifferent because she had a plan and she was following it through. Just think of that. The being strangled and the pain and the confusion that they're going through, and it's being done by their mom. Their mom is the one that's hurting them. Their mom is the one that's killing them. That's extreme atrocity and cruelty. She didn't see them in that moment as individual human beings with rights, with dreams, with futures, individually belonging to them. You heard about the 3 kids.
Is he writing or
Cora
something?
wanted to be a doctor and a mom. Dawson wanted to be a firefighter.
Oh,
Callan
my
never got the
gosh.
chance to dream. Who knows what future he would have dreamed for himself.
Holy shit. This is intense, man. I don't like this.
She killed them, and she left them there on the floor with the bands around their necks. She didn't bring them up to their beds and put them with their
Is it making everybody else uncomfortable?
Them up gently and lovingly, leaving them peacefully there. No. She left them discarded on the basement floor like broken toys because she was done playing the game. You know to a moral certainty, she is guilty.
That's it? Okay. Kind of glad that's over. I'm not going to
Thank you,
lie.
counsel. Now, members of the jury can sit here for a while. Does anybody need a short break? I think that would. All right. So we're going to return now to the instructions that I have. In rereading my instructions, I just kind of want to make sure that something's clear. So I'm going to ask you to go back to page 6. I think we were talking about murder in the second degree. Everybody get there.
Is the judge allowed to? I mean, obviously he's allowed to, but like I feel like he's trying to like sway some things by just not letting them rest. And now he's like, okay, well, here, let's get into this now. That seems weird to me.
All right. And what I just kind of wanted to make clear, that you may consider the defendant's mental condition at the time of the killing, including any credible evidence of mental impairment or the effect on the defendant of her consumption of prescription drugs, in determining any of the elements in the murder in the second degree charge as well. I mentioned that for some of the others, but and specifically for the charge in murder in second degree, there's an element regarding intent. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to make that clear. Probably is suggested in that, but as I read through it, I just kind of wanted remind you that you can, as I said, you can consider the defendant's mental condition at the time of the killing, including any credible evidence of mental impairment or the effect on the defendant of her consumption of prescription drugs in determining the elements in murder in the second degree. All right. So I hope that cleared things up rather than confusing you any. Now I'm going to go to the general principles in regards to this case. All right. Now, as I said to you before, I'm incorporating the instructions that I gave earlier before the closing arguments with these instructions. So I want to talk about the presumption of innocence and the burden of proof. Once again, the indictments against Ms. Clancy are only an accusation. They're not evidence. The defendant has denied that she's guilty of the crimes charged in these indictments. The law presumes the defendant to be innocent of the charges against her. This presumption of innocence is a rule of law that compels you to find the defendant not guilty unless and until the Commonwealth produces evidence from whatever source that proves that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. This burden of proof never shifts. The defendant is not required to call any witnesses or produce any evidence since she is presumed to be innocent. The presumption of innocence stays with the defendant unless and until the evidence convinces you unanimously as a jury that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It requires you to find the defendant not guilty unless your guilt has been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. Your verdict, whether it is guilty or not guilty, must be unanimous. All right. Now, reasonable doubt. The burden is on the Commonwealth to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of the charges made against her, as I just told you. But what is proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, the term is often used and probably pretty well understood, though it's not easily defined. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean proof beyond all possible doubt, for everything in the lives of human beings is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. The charge is proved beyond a reasonable doubt if, after you've compared and considered all of the evidence, you have in your minds an abiding conviction to a moral certainty that the charge is true. When we refer to moral certainty, we mean the highest degree of certainty possible in matters relating to human affairs, based solely on the evidence that has been put before you in this case. I've told you that every person is presumed to be innocent until she is proved guilty, and that the burden of proof is on the prosecutor. If you evaluate all the evidence and you still have a reasonable doubt remaining, the defendant is entitled to the benefit of that doubt and must be acquitted. It is not enough for the Commonwealth to establish a probability, even a strong probability, that the defendant is more likely to be guilty than not guilty. That is not enough. Instead, the evidence must convince you of the defendant's guilt to a reasonable and moral certainty, a certainty that convinces your understanding and satisfies your reason in judgment as jurors who are sworn to act conscientiously on the evidence. This is what we mean by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I want to talk initially about my function of the judge. My function as a judge in this case has been to see that the trial was conducted fairly, efficiently, and in an orderly manner. It's also my responsibility to rule on what you may consider as evidence and to instruct you on the law that applies in this case. It's your duty as jurors in this case to accept the law as I stated to you. You should consider all of my instructions as a whole. You may not ignore any instruction or give special attention to any one instruction. You must follow the law as I give it to you, whether you agree with it or not. That's not
I need
just
some
because
Gus
I'm the
Snuggles here
judge.
right now.
It's because every person who comes to court for trial is equal and is subject to the same law. And if jurors in each case were to apply what they thought the law should be, and the jurors in different cases had different views, then the parties in those cases would not be treated equally. The law that I'm instructing you on is the law that has been established by our legislature and our appellate courts, and it applies to everyone. And you must apply the law as I instruct you. Function of the jury.
All right.
Your function
I mean,
is to determine the facts.
All right. So I guess now they get to deliberate, and we'll come back if we have our thing. Like if I'm around, I'll go live when they give the verdict. Everybody message me when they get the verdict. Message me at once. I think the closing arguments are important because it's obviously a summary of the entire of prosecution and the defense. That's a really important thing. That was sometimes hard to watch, though, I'm not gonna lie. So anyway, we'll come back when there's a verdict. I think it won't be for probably at least till tomorrow. At least tomorrow. I don't think this is gonna be a quick one. I don't know. I could be wrong. So anyway, thanks for being here. Now I gotta get to work. I got videos to do for tomorrow, you guys. So thanks for being here, and let me know when they do that other thing. Bye.